So welcome. We're going to get started. I'm so happy to introduce Alicia Freeman. I'll let her introduce herself. I'm Michelle Fontenot. I've been with tlap for a year now. I was a therapist in my former life and then became a lawyer. And today we're going to be talking about juggling the roles of a practicing lawyer and being a caregiver and provide some tips for survival. Alicia, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, yes. I'm Alicia Freeman. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I am, been with tlap for a month now, I guess. But I used to work for the State Bar of Texas as a continuing legal education program coordinator. And I'm also a therapist in another life. But I'm very glad to be here and excited to talk to you all about this topic today.
Before we get started, I'm going to put some things in the chat. We just found out that there's some CLEs, 3 free CLEs. So I just put those links in the chat. They're 1 hour each. So if you wanted additional free CLE, there it is. And I'm going to start sharing my screen so we can talk about our topic. And Alicia, let me know if that's full screen.
That's perfect.
Okay, great. You want to take this?
Yeah, so as Michelle talked about, we're going to be talking about juggling the roles of a practicing lawyer and being a caregiver. And I think that this is the perfect quote to really start our presentation off. So it says there are only 4 kinds of people in this world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. So each of you all should have that icon on your Zoom link where you can click the little hand. And I want you all to click it just to show us how many of you all relate to this particular quote, because it's definitely a very universal quote, right? At some point, we're either going to experience being a caregiver or we may need a caregiver. So I'm glad people are raising their hands. So far, we have 2 people. Anyone else relate to this quote? Awesome.
I do. So,
Me too.
Yeah. I moved to Austin. Well, I moved back to Austin in 2019. So just 3 years ago, to be closer to my aging mom and stepdad. So I lived in Seattle. So it was a pretty big change. And getting licensed as an attorney in Texas, that was something I started working on, I think probably 2018. Or actually I was licensed in 2018. So I was working on that for a while before I actually moved here. But it has been an interesting road, and I'm sure I will have plenty to share as we go through.
Absolutely. I haven't been in that role, I would say long term. I've been in it more short term as far as taking care of my parents when they've fallen sick. But now they've taken on this caregiver role, and it's been long term already. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that actually means.
So they're caring for your grandfather, is that right?
My grandmother, yes.
Grandmother, okay.
Yes.
So
that brings us to the question, right? Sorry, Michelle, go ahead.
Oh, and just so you know, I can't see my notes, so you go ahead.
Okay. No worries.
You're going to take the bulk of this tonight.
Okay. So what is a caregiver? A person who gives care to people who need help taking care of themselves. This could be long or short-term care, and it could be formal or informal. I'm going to talk a little bit about long-term versus short-term care. So essentially, when we think about short-term, that typically is based off of what that person may be struggling with that you're caring for, right? So usually when it comes to short-term care, this is something when you have a parent or a spouse who has an illness, an injury, or some type of surgery. And I actually was a short-term caregiver just last year when my husband tore his Achilles. And that's a whole nother story because he was convinced that it didn't happen, but it really did happen. And so we've spent from now until last May, actually like going through that process. Oh, someone put it down in the chat about the links, Michelle, if you want to resend those. But over the last like 6 or 7 months, we've spent time like helping him heal, especially those first 3 months where he wasn't mobile. So that is a clear definition of what short-term care is. But when it comes to long-term care, that's when you have maybe, again, a parent, a spouse, a child who may have an illness that is like an autoimmune disease, or a parent who's suffering from Alzheimer's or dementia. Those are like more of your long-term examples. I'm going to let Michelle talk a little bit about your formal versus informal caregiving.
So formal caregivers are care providers who are, that's their full-time job. So like hired home care nurse, just home care aides. And then informal are, people who do it but don't do it for pay. And so, the stresses for both are, pretty immense. I think, if that's your chosen profession and that's what you want to do, I'm sure it's super rewarding. But if you're an attorney and you're caring for your parent, so in an informal role, I can attest, some of the things that I spend time on is researching home care providers. Like, how can we find someone? What does insurance cover? The last weekend, for the first time, we had my mom come to Austin for the weekend, and we had a caregiver spend the night at the house with my stepdad. He's like 10 years older than my mom, and he's in pretty good health, but he's, it's something could happen, and so that ended up working out well. So finding the informal caregiver sometimes finds the formal caregiver.
Absolutely. So something you just mentioned, Michelle, was stress. And although it's a relatable topic, right? Everyone has probably experienced stress at some point in their life. People normalize dealing with stress in regards to being a caregiver. And so that stress tends to triculate into other things in their lives, but it's more accepting because we automatically assume that this is something that I'm going to deal with as a caregiver, whether it is short-term or long-term, whether it's formal or informal. So what is caregiver stress, right? Caregiver stress is due to the emotional and physical strain of caregiving. Caregivers report a high level of stress than those who are not caregivers and are either providing help or are on call almost all day. So I was reading a little bit about caregiving, and something that it talked about was when it comes to being a caregiver, you're only spending about 20 hours out of the week on average, right, to be a caregiver. But in reality, you're spending 24/7 as a caregiver, whether it's short term or long term, because even if you're not helping that person physically in person, there's so many other of those emotional ties that you have to the person that you're giving care to. So you're constantly thinking about them. You're constantly trying to make plans, emergency plans, pay bills, manage relationship with your family. All these different things play a role in who you are as a caregiver and how that affects your day in and out.
Yeah, I talk to my mom pretty much every evening. I actually, last night I said, don't call me because I have a training and I can't answer the phone. But when she calls and it's not our regular time, like I automatically have a little bit of panic, like, oh no, what happened? What went wrong? Invariably, she's calling to ask what her password is for a certain website. But I don't know if anybody has had the opportunity to try and help an elderly parent with technology from afar. Because that's the one thing, like even when I lived in Seattle and I would try and, get my mom signed up or help her, do FaceTime. Oh my gosh, I would get so stressed out because, trying to explain something and you're not there to point or help, it drives me crazy. Any of you have other issues, in your role as caregivers that provide stress, go ahead and pop it in the chat function. So
please.
I'd be the only.
And I don't think we asked the participants if they were currently caregivers right now. So leave that in the chat as well.
So who gets
ahead.
Oh, who gets caregiver stress? Anyone, but according to womenshealth.gov, women are more likely to say they have stress and other health problems than male caregivers. And I think later on, we're going to get to some statistics, and women tend to be in caregiving roles more than men. So women are often admit it more, and they're often in caregiving roles more. Caregivers of people with Alzheimer's disease or dementia are more likely to have health problems or experience depressive symptoms than those who are caregivers of those with other conditions. And 36% of family caregivers characterize their situation as highly stressful. So, some of the things that Alicia and I talked about when we were talking and prepping for this is, one of the situations, if you're in the caregiver role with your family and you have other family involved, people have different opinions of what should happen. So, right now I have an aunt and an uncle my aunt has Alzheimer's and my uncle is 90 and he's caring for her. And last week, while he was on a FaceTime call with his kids, he fell down and he refused to go to the hospital. So that was like on a Friday or Saturday. By Monday, he was in so much pain, they finally took him to the hospital and he'd broken 2 vertebrae. And now he has had surgery and he just got put in a rehab facility, but the care for my aunt is now, 24/7, which they do have a provider come every day, but not 24/7. It was just, I think, 6 to 8 hours. So my cousins are having to step in and my uncle is stubborn and he wants to be home. So, but he just can't do it. So I know, difference of opinions with just my cousins of who's doing what, and who's going to make decisions. I do not envy them right now. Do you have anything to add, Alicia?
No, I mean, you've touched on some very important topics, and I know that we're like really drilling in this idea of stress, but it's so important, and you'll understand a little bit more, like I said earlier, on why we're talking about stress so much in this particular presentation. But we can go to the next slide.
The other thing about that too is those of you who are lawyers know that, being a lawyer is a stressful occupation. People come to you with their biggest problems and ask you to hold them and fix it. And so on top of, the work stress, then if you're in a caregiver role, just add it on top of all that. So I just want to point that out.
So some of the signs of caregiver stress, which is pretty much the same as experiencing stress in general, right? It's feeling overwhelmed, constantly worried, feeling tired often, getting too much sleep or not enough, gaining or losing weight, becoming easily irritated or angry, which is one of the things that a lot of people kind of disregard, which is very important for you to start paying attention to more, especially when you're talking to someone that's directly related to helping you as a caregiver or even in your practice. These are signs that you're starting to experience that stress. Losing interest in activities you used to enjoy, feeling sad or worried, having frequent headaches, bodily pain, and other physical problems. So I think all of these are huge signs, but a lot of times, like I said, we've normalized stress so much in 2022 and the last 2 years with COVID, we're working from home. So that's not as stressful, or maybe we're not working from home and we're working even more than we did pre-COVID. Adding that stress along with the unknown, then becoming a caregiver, especially when it's an unexpected role that you have taken on. All of these signs are there, but we've normalized them so much. And I keep using that word because a lot of people say, oh, I'm just tired because I didn't get enough sleep. Oh, I apologize that I snapped at you about an article that wasn't submitted on time, or I'm just having a headache and I can't shake it because I just need to drink some more water. But ultimately, in the grander scheme of things, there's some underlying issues that are going on. And sometimes we have to pause and really think about what's really going on with our bodies and why are we actually feeling this way. And once we recognize that, what do we do next?
So this was from an attorney that we found online who said their advice, this attorney, so some of you, if you practice family law or estate planning, I'm sure these are experiences you're intimately aware of, but elder care attorneys are often always helping family members with their elderly loved ones. So if you're a family member or friend is helping a loved one, here are some areas of stress where you may, hiring an attorney or an elder life and care planning attorney would be helpful. So some of the situations, so one, the primary caregiver feels overwhelmed from trying to meet the elderly person's needs and suffers from burnout, ill health, frustration, or guilt. These are all things, if you can't meet, as a caregiver of an elderly person at some point, things are going to decline most likely. And so, it's super stressful because you can't make it better. You can't make them younger. You can provide, a safe space, but so that's time to call an elder care attorney. Family members are concerned about a parent's health and confused about care options. So what to do next or where to get help. We're going to provide some online resources that we've found. But I know, for me, trying to find, what makes sense. Are the caregivers, vaccinated? Just what are the questions that you need to ask when you're interviewing or trying to find a caregiver? Do you want to do 3 and 4?
Yeah, the elder is hospitalized and the family has been told that the elder is no longer capable of independent living. And the elder is ill or disabled with children who live out of town. So that's definitely one of my concerns as my parents continue to age, especially with just the history of our family in regards to some of the signs of like Alzheimer's and dementia. I've had several grandparents who've experienced that. My maternal grandparent or grandmother, my maternal mother, her mom just got diagnosed with dementia as well. So we have my mom's mother who has been recently diagnosed with this, and then my dad's mom, who my parents are taking care of right now, who hasn't been formally diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia, but is showing all the signs of it. But it's due to her having previous, what they call mini strokes throughout her life. She's been a chronic smoker, probably been smoking since she was about 15. She's tried to quit on and off, but again, your body deteriorates, your health deteriorates. And again, that could cause possibly you having stroke, high blood pressure, etc. So now we're in a situation to where both of my grandparents, which are my 2 living grandparents, both experiencing the same thing at the same time. So I do worry about what is it going to look like for my parents' future, and what will that mean for me, being that my parents are in Mississippi and I'm still here in Texas. granted, I still have siblings there, but they're younger siblings. So oftentimes it's looked upon the older siblings to be able to step up to help take care of some of that load when it comes to becoming or having to be a caregiver. I see someone wrote in the chat about 4.5 years ago, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. My wife and I had sold our house and were living independently in a senior community. About 3 years later, it was apparent that my care as well, assuming my duties, were simply too much for her. And hold on, I think we missed one part of it. I went into.
It's not finished, but also Miguel wrote that his wife is feeling a lot of pressure because her parents are elderly and they're in the woodlands. So Miguel, I responded to that and gave you my email. One of the things at tlap that we're trying to do is find resources for people across the state. But I have a friend who lives in the woodlands and she's caring for her uncle. And so I can ask her questions and get back to you. So, and it sounds like Mr. Stromberg, that you went into assisted living at the height of COVID, which can't imagine how hard that's been, including, being safe and not having visitors, or, I know that some places have allowed one visitor. So I just, what a stressful time. And for you to be, aware that your care was too much for your wife. It's a really hard realization. These are all really difficult conversations to have. We're going to keep going, but we really appreciate the comments and we're happy to talk with any of you and respond to the comments. So questions are much appreciated. So one of the things is when an elder or person that you're caring for gets diagnosed with some difficult to manage condition. So like Parkinson's, I can see, that you hated it during COVID, during the lockdown, and thankfully things have let up. They keep going up and down in terms of what's safe. But I feel like we know so much more than we did during the initial phases of COVID. I remember, in fact, like my parents, I didn't see them for a couple months from March until May. And my stepfather had a surgery. So they live about an hour outside of Austin. The surgery was here in town in Austin. And, we basically made them and my partner in our COVID pod. And so after that, they were the only people we saw for the longest amount of time. No friends, just my parents. The elder has experienced a catastrophic event, such as a fall, medication mistake, or accident, like I was talking about my uncle. So a medical crisis, such as a stroke or heart attack. The silver alerts when an elder forgets critical information or wanders off, or when they're unable to provide essential care, such as maintaining proper hygiene, taking prescriptions as directed, eating properly, or moving safely around the house. The situation with my parents is my stepfather is, he's 94, so his walking is limited. He can walk and he can do stuff, but he doesn't do much. And so my mom, who's 10 years younger than him, is doing all of the care. She's going grocery shopping, making, food, cleaning food. She has help, but not much. And they, I just watch it wearing my mom out. So, and then the final one is financial. Like, how do you pay for long-term care?
Yeah, my parents right now are experiencing 7, 8, 9, and 10. Both of my parents are business owners. The business run based off of them, and with my grandmother living in the home, They've had several experiences with her, like walking out the house all of a sudden, and or leaving the gas on in the house, putting her coffee in the oven, not being able to take care of herself physically as far as self-care. All of those things they're experiencing just in the year and a half that she's been with them. So it's a very stressful situation. It's a very hard situation to one have to deal with those things, but at the same time, see your parent experience those things as well.
Yeah, for sure. So here's some of the statistics that we were talking about. There's approximately 43.5 million caregivers who provide unpaid care to an adult or child in the last 12 months. So this was from 2015. I know that has increased over 2020.
I think it's like 56.7%, I think now.
Oh my gosh, and specifically tonight, we're not talking about parenting. So when there's statistics that include that, we may do a training in the future on parenting while you're lawyering. And if you guys do, the other thing, if you have ideas or things you want to hear from us, please put that in the chat and we'll be sure and address it. So about 34.2 million Americans have provided unpaid care to an adult age 50 or older in the last 12 months. I'll do this page and you can do the next.
Sure.
The majority of caregivers, so 82% care for one other adult, while 15% care for two adults and 3% for three or more adults. That's, boy, that would be hard to care for, more than one person at a time. Approximately 39.8 million caregivers provide care to adults aged 18 or plus with a disability or illness, or about 16% of Americans. So dealing with, adults, if you're an adult when you're 18, I guess legally you are, but all adults with disabilities or illness. And then about 15.7 million adult family caregivers care for someone who has Alzheimer's or dementia. And I think the most recent statistic I saw about that was about 7% of people care for someone with Alzheimer's or dementia.
So family caregivers who provide complex chronic care, 46% perform medical and nursing tasks. So like we talked about before, that I think it was number 8 on the slide about your parent or whoever you're caring for unable to take care of themselves physically when it comes to their hygiene. All of those things play a role in the nursing or the medical test, making sure that they're taking the proper amount of medication. My dad has a pill holder where he has to set out the pills every single day. And if she forgets something, then, it throws off the entire day in regards to her medication regimen. More than 96% provide help with activities of daily living, your ADL, so such as personal hygiene, dressing and undressing, getting in and out of bed, instrumental activities of daily living, such as the medications, like we talked about, the groceries, transportation, or using technology or both.
Again, there's that using technology. I actually, taught my mom how to use HEB and curbside. So that was, could get on her account and make sure that she had, done what she thought she'd done. So that was a technological feat.
Well, I'm sure very helpful for you, so that it can actually be delivered to her versus you having to do it every time she needs groceries. So.
Right. But I felt so glad that she wasn't going through the grocery store.
Yeah. Safety. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree. So distribution of caregiver age. So average age is 49.2 years old. 48% of caregivers are 18 to 49 years old. 34% of caregivers are 65 plus. And that is like huge to really note because caregivers are young. So, think about this in hindsight, right? You're dealing with stress as a caregiver. Think about dealing with stress at that age. And we wonder why caregiving is universal, because eventually the stress that you're dealing with could potentially cause health issues, and that can lead into you needing a caregiver next. So it's so huge to really pay attention to those things and think about, that not only the stress, but am I taking care of myself?
So distribution of care recipients age. So those who are receiving care. So the average age was 69.4 years old. 14% of care recipients are 18 to 49, and 47% are 75 years or older. Another statistic that it kind of makes sense, the number of hours dedicated to caregiving increases with the age of the caregiver. And the higher hour caregivers are on average 51.8 years of age, whereas lower hour caregivers average 48 years of age. So, I think when you're older, you have older parents. So it's likely that, that's when they need care. And when you're younger, either you can't do it or they don't need it yet. So that kind of makes sense.
So the average duration of a caregiver's role is 4 years. Only 30% of caregivers provide care less than a year. Only 30%. 24% of caregivers provide care for more than 5 years. 15% of caregivers provide care for 10 years or more. And the high hour caregivers are twice as likely to have been in their caregiving role for more than 10 years. Regardless of employment status, unpaid caregivers report that positive activities in their respective daily lives are reduced by 27.2% as a result of their caregiving responsibilities. This effect is 3 times greater in their personal lives than in their professional lives.
So, this is another reason it's so important to take care of yourself as a caregiver, because you're giving up a lot of the things that make you feel good, a lot of positives. You're getting that role and hopefully a positive relationship with the the person to whom you're providing care. But it's not always that way. People who are older get cranky and they hurt. And so they're not always, and family has a special way of pushing all those buttons. So, it's important that you take care of yourself. So,
well, speaking of all these statistics, talking about a typical day in the life of a caregiver is important as well, because I think I said earlier, the percentage was about 24.4 hours per week on caregiving, but realistically it's 24/7, let's be honest here. But some of the other things that a caregiver may experience is juggling roles. So as a lawyer, you're maybe experiencing where you have a case right now that you have to be in the office more frequently, or maybe you're actually in court and you receive a phone call, having to actually juggle that role of working full-time and being a full-time caregiver, hiring, managing, and maintaining a caregiver. So if you actually are, a person who can hire someone to provide that care for your family member, then you now have to manage, what does that really look like? How am I going to maintain it financially? And as well as making sure that they're getting the best care, because although in ideal world, we want that extra support, it doesn't mean that it's always going to be the best support. So there is that fear of, yes, I've hired someone, but are they going to be the best person for my family member? We have those non-emergency versus emergency calls. I want Michelle to talk a little bit about that, because she mentioned to me already a good example.
Right. So yeah, like I said earlier, when my mom calls at 11:30 in the morning, I panic because I'm wondering what's going on. But it was last February, my stepfather, who, he's got a cell phone, but it's not fancy. He doesn't have a fancy. So he doesn't call that much, but he called me and said that my mom fell and she was not making sense. So she fell and hit her head, and I'm out of the house within 15 minutes, just shooting to go, meet them at the hospital. So that's not a typical day, but it's always possible.
And you have to be flexible, right?
Right. Thankfully I could, leave and go be there. But if I was prepping for a trial, it's not something I could have done, or if I was in court. So I think, is there a backup plan? But we'll talk about that.
Yes. 13 days each month on tasks such as shopping, food preparation, housekeeping, laundry, transportation, and giving medication. You have 6 days per month on feeding, dressing, grooming, walking, bathing, and assistance toileting. And then 13 hours per month researching care services or information on the disease, coordinating with physician visits, and managing financial matters.
Yeah, I think, I don't think I spend that 13 hours a month researching, but, the question comes up fairly often is when does financial, when do I need to take over that for them? So.
And I think that's the next thing if you want to lead into power of attorney.
Right. So issues that stem from being a caregiver. So, one of the things, the power of attorney. So being able to make decisions in a medical emergency or a financial situation. So thankfully my parents have already done that, and I have a copy of their estate plans. The importance of estate planning with elders and with yourself. And so I think when I was in law school, I did a trust and estates clinic, and we went, my clinic partner and I went to help a woman who had called the clinic because her husband had dementia and she wanted an estate plan for him. So we had to go and meet with her and tell her that it was too late for him. He was no longer competent to do an estate plan, but that she should do one because she doesn't want her kids to be in that same situation that she's in. So we ended up doing her estate plan. So I think, one of the things as attorneys, a lot of people say they'll do that later. And I think, peace of mind and having estate planning documents before you need them, they can always be changed, is super important. Dealing with medical and care providers. So like Alicia was talking about, the home care providers. I know my aunt with Alzheimer's, she was firing people often and just being mean. And so, my cousins were having to find people who were, more people, which is hard. And lately with my stepfather, I've started going to some of their medical appointments. Mom and stepdad started going to medical appointments just to get the real scoop and try and advocate for, things like physical therapy at home and things that I think that they need. So do you want to?
Sure. So interpersonal conflicts with spouse, partner, extended family, etc. This one is a big one, especially when you and your spouse, partner, or family member does not agree with the service of care for your family member, especially when it comes to parents or children, right? Having two, like I mentioned earlier, having two grandmothers who are currently dealing with some cognitive decline issues. There is one, my mom is the oldest of 14 kids, okay? So there are a lot of opinions on how my grandmother should be taken care of, as well as like land, finances, all of these things plays a huge role in what's really ultimately going to happen. And so that's why, as Michelle mentioned before, that power of attorney and having that estate planned out already, so that that's one less issue that you have to address in regards to your family members. But then also like moving in a parent, for instance, who is dealing with some mental health, on some not just mental health, but cognitive issues. What does that really look like? Having those, one, you may already feel stress within your marriage, and then this happens and you bring someone into your home, and that's only going to cause more issues and more stress. So really being aware of how your decisions are going to impact you and your family members are huge. Depression and anxiety, too, are along with stress, right? Which stress is typically an underlying issue with depression and anxiety. A lot of times, those are two main things that really play a role on if you become a caregiver, a formal caregiver for you or an informal caregiver, how that's really going to show up in your relationship with the person that you're caring for. Are you really going to be 100% for them if you're still struggling with your own things? Weak immune system, so you may find yourself, like I said, tired all the time, feeling sick, can't shake this cold, or constantly having headaches. And it's all due to stress, obesity, overeating, increased risk of chronic diseases, heart disease, all of that, problems with short-term memory and paying attention. So although there's nothing really wrong with you as far as like actually having cognitive issues, the stress and the depression and anxiety will affect your memory. And you're going to find yourself forgetting things just as much as probably the person you're caring for. And it's like, okay, that's a red flag. I need to do something different.
Right. So here's some of the mental health issues that caregivers can experience. And we're going to run through this because we want to get to some of the solutions. Like we've mentioned, anger management, I think that's the one. Increased, anger management with the elder is important to pay attention to as well as with your loved ones. Increased alcohol and substance use. So those are some important red flags. And I wanted to include some things on elder abuse because I think it's important to know. Being a caregiver of an elderly person is a risk for elder abuse. So the rate of abuse has been reported to be as high as 11.9%. And the people that are most likely to abuse elders are their children and their caregivers. And that's, it's sheerly numbers, but it's important to remember that and take care of yourself so that you can take care of the person that you're providing care for. So I'm going to just fly through this. Interventions to reduce abuse by caregivers. So reducing depression in caregivers, so taking care of yourself, seeing a therapist, having a support group, practicing good self-care like walking or running or exercising or breathing. That's an important thing for reducing the potential for a physical harm of an elder. Respite services, so having a backup plan so it's not just you. Anger management training, cognitive reframing, or increasing pleasant events. I think these are super important. Alicia, you want to talk a little bit about this study?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to get to just the meat of it. Basically, this study looked at potential harmful behaviors from a caregiver. So everything that Michelle just touched on briefly simply talked about how with anger, depression, anxiety, how those things affect your capability of being a good caregiver. So essentially what it found is when anger is coupled with moderate and high levels of depression or resentment, right? And it increases the levels of potentially harmful behavior, which will ultimately lead to you not being the best caregiver for that family member. And so it's so important to really recognize those things because, again, caregiving can be planned or unplanned, but your resentment, if you experience that with that family member, is still there. That's going to determine how well you give care to that person, how well you're going to be as a caregiver, or ultimately the quality of care that you're providing for them.
So who cares for the caregiver? And so here's some tips for self-care that I mentioned just a few. Setting boundaries is important. You have to be able to say no. Having a community. You need to avoid isolation, which has been hard over the past couple of years. Have a safe place to decompress. Open communication. Taking time for yourself. So, one of the things on the airplane, they're like, put the mask on yourself first before you help others. You need to have that for yourself. Accepting help, focus on things you can provide and control, and seek counseling or talk to your doctor if you're feeling like it's too much, which would be normal. So some tips and tools. So have a trusted person or persons as a backup plan. Plan ahead for emergencies. So imagine the worst and prep ahead so you're not having to make it up in the middle of a crisis. One thing, having an open communication with your employer or employee so that they know there's like what is an important call. Maybe if your paralegal takes a call from a person that you're providing care for, and they can tell that it's a question that can wait. So that's an important thing. And creating a schedule with flexibility when you can. You want to take the rest?
Yeah, look for a home healthcare aide. So as we talked about, oftentimes we may not be able to provide that care 24/7. So it's important, if possible, to have someone to help support you in those things. Learn better ways to help your loved one. So again, even if you can't afford a home healthcare aide, what are some things that would be useful for you to provide for them? Like Michelle mentioned, teaching them how to use Instacart to get those groceries, right? That's a helpful tool. So now that isn't solely on you to do those things for them, and you feel safe, or you feel good that they're safe because they no longer have to do that themselves. Join a support group. That's always helpful. Ask and accept help. So we can always ask for help, right? We can always say, I need help, but does that always mean that you're going to accept it when it's given to you? So it's important that you really pay attention to that, and then get organized. Like we said, schedules are a huge part in being a caregiver. Medication regimen, self-care, groceries, all those things, getting organized with creating a weekly schedule with flexibility really, really helps you.
So check the facts. I think start to recognize your own triggers and symptoms of stress and burnout. Stop and think about what is going on, and then ask yourself quick questions about the symptoms. Like, for example, you want to take this?
Yeah, I really like this particular one, because oftentimes, like we said, we normalize stress. We don't really think about where it's stemming from. And so this is just simply 3 ways or 3 things you can do to recognize if it's just stress from not getting enough sleep, or is it stress due to me caregiving. So an example of that is, did I just snap at my spouse or assistant because I'm just tired and didn't get enough sleep, or am I getting overwhelmed? Do we recognize the difference in that, right? And the leading question is, am I overwhelmed because I'm busy at work, or because I don't know what to feel because the person I'm caring for is declining? So checking the facts really allows us to look at what's really going on with ourselves, and what are the next steps after we recognize what's going on.
So I think this is, you're not alone. So if you're watching this, you have access to calling tlap. If you need some immediate counseling, we have 24/7. It's called in the moment counseling, where we can connect you with a licensed mental health professional. We can talk with you and help you problem solve, but building a community so that you're not alone is important. These are some online resources, and if you want, we're going to kind of breeze through here. But if you want this slide deck, we can, send us an email and we can send you the slide deck so you can look at these. But I think it's amazing and important to know that there's a lot of online caregiver support. And so to figure out where you feel comfortable and where you think it's helpful to get some support. For more information about caregiver stress, there's some numbers. So, you know, like I said, it's too much information right now. Do you want to take this? And I'm going to mute myself.
Yeah, you can actually just move to the next slide, because if anyone wants these numbers or information, we can gladly send it to you. And then just a little bit about our program if you're not familiar with it. Again, Michelle and I work for tlap. We do have 3 other people in our department, Penny, Erica, and Paul. Erica, if you haven't met her before, she is the director for tlap. But a little bit about what we do is we help lawyers, judges, and law students. We help them find support when they're struggling with substance use, mental health issues, disorders, cognitive needs, stress, and burnout. Anytime you call or email, whatever, or text, because we do provide that as well, it's all confidential. Calls can be anonymous, especially when you're calling to report that someone else that you know that is a lawyer, law student, or judge is in need of help or support. We do services and referrals. We are licensed professionals, and we connect you to other licensed professionals, whether that be therapists, psychiatrists, group support, peer support. All of those things are a part of what we provide for others, as well as education and public awareness.
And just so you know, what we help with the cognitive needs, people call, like children call about their parents who are attorneys. Attorneys call about their spouses. Attorneys call about their, business partners. So we help. We have a lot of resources. It's also an area that we know we need more resources. So if you have some ideas, we're building our resource and referral list to include helping people with cognitive decline or cognitive impairment. So, and we can talk you through some ideas and thoughts about how to, because that's a hard conversation to have. So this is somewhat repetitive, so I'm just going to go through that. This is where you can find information. So there's our website, www.tlaphelps.org, the phone number, you can call or text, and then the tlap support toolbox.
And you can find it on the actual website, the toolbox.
Right, yeah. And the other thing, if finances are getting in the way of you asking for help or seeking counseling or psychiatric services or substance use services, we have access to a trust, so we can talk you through the application so talk you through the application, send it to you. It's fairly straightforward. And these are the amounts: up to $3,000 for outpatient counseling, up to $4,000 for intensive outpatient treatment, and up to $10,000 for inpatient treatment. And I've had people, most of the time people are seeking inpatient treatment for substance use, but I've had people get the grant for psychiatric treatment, inpatient treatment. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to put the CLE information in the chat function. So that's for you to get credit. We have a few minutes. Sorry, I was worried about how many slides we had, so I wanted to kind of breeze through there. But does anyone have questions? Or JC, I hope you're in a better situation now that COVID lockdown has changed. But if anyone have questions or feedback or ideas, that would be great.
And let us know if this presentation was helpful for you. Sean said, thank you for the info. I would never thought to call tlap with help around caregiver issues. You're very welcome, Sean.
And Sean, just so you know, tlap has a committee, and one of our subcommittees is on cognitive impairment. So we focus, another committee focuses on suicide prevention. And we also have one that focuses on law school. So yeah, so we are definitely actively, trying to increase our resources. And those of you who don't know, as an attorney, if you go to the bar's website and do successor planning, there's the bar has made it possible to appoint someone. So if you were ever disabled, or if you died and you still had your active practice, which can happen to anybody, especially like now during COVID, you can appoint a successor attorney who is a person that you would talk to. You wouldn't just nominate someone who doesn't know, but someone who's willing to be your successor. And what that means is they manage your case files. That doesn't mean they become the attorney for your clients. It just means that they help manage the files, notify clients that something's happened to you and they need to find a new attorney. So it's super important to know about and to look into, because I think, if anything over the last couple of years that we've learned is that surprises happen. So, and Jeff asked, where can we access a list of the TLAP committees? So there's 6 committees, and what are they? But the members are appointed by the bar presidents, and they serve for 3 years. So the subcommittee that I chair is law schools and solo practitioners.
And I have cognitive decline in special populations. And Paul has
suicide prevention
and stigma. Yes.
Yeah. So those are the 6 committees that we have. Each year, we work with the bar president and with our team to come up with, kind of what are the goals, and the committee members, what are the goals that they want to reach each year. And we have meetings a couple times a year, but the ultimate idea is to increase the resources that we can, that the staff members at TLAP can provide for the lawyers, law students, and judges across the state. So, but great question, Jeff, and I hope I've answered that. I think that if nobody has any other questions, we're so happy that you joined with us, and thank you so much. And we will see you next month. If anyone got my email, or you can find Alicia's, and you have some topic ideas, hit us up. We would love to.
I'll put my email really quickly in the chat as well.
And for those of you, well, I guess everybody, I hope everybody makes it through the freeze over the next, and I hope it's not snow big too. Anyway, thank you and good night.
Thank you all. We'll appreciate you.